All right, looks like we are live, and I want to welcome everybody to Standing for Truth. My name is Donnie, and I am your host and moderator for tonight's 2-in-1 event. We have a debate plus an open mic challenge, basically, where we're going to be engaging in impromptu debate for the next several hours. I've also got Sam, as I like to say, my award-winning co-host here with me to help out with the show. Sam, how you doing tonight, brother?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be back, and I'm excited for tonight.
I feel like we were just here for our last open mic. I think that was a ton of fun. We had a lot of great guests. Kent joined us for the first couple hours. We had some great debate, and so I expect some
long
great
enough.
It never is. It never is. So for those wondering in the audience, and I'm sure most are aware of, the first hour, we're going to have a debate between Kent and AtheistJunior. If I'm not mistaken, this is round 3. AJ and Kent had their first rounds here over the last couple years. And here we go, the much anticipated round 3. So AJ, I guess we're just going to hand it over to you. Give yourself a brief introduction for anybody who is not familiar with you, and then move on into your first point for tonight, and we'll start the debate.
Sure. Well, my name's AJ, and my YouTube channel is AtheistJunior. I do response videos, debates, open mic stuff, just, good videos. I actually just hit 8,000 subscribers on my channel, I think today. So it's exciting. So in a debate about the evidence for evolution, what is something that you would be looking for if you wanted to call something evolution? Well, it would be populations of organisms that are adapting to their environment and that are being able to reproduce. Those offspring are going to have mutations because no child is going to be an exact clone of its parents. And in those mutations, there's going to be ones that are mostly harmful. Some are going to be neutral, but some are going to be beneficial, and some of those are going to be selected for. So what's an example of an animal, or let's say an insect, adapting to its environment? Well, when the London Underground was built in 1863, workers inadvertently created a tidy, isolated habitat for the world's favorite bug, mosquitoes. So standing water would collect in the tunnels, which made a perfect breeding ground for those blood-sucking insects. Humans discovered this during World War II when the tunnels were used as overnight bomb shelters and the mosquitoes took to feasting on the people. Now, what's actually weird about this is that they were biting people at all, because the mosquitoes that lived in the London Underground were actually a subspecies of Culex pipens, a species that the above-ground mosquitoes usually feed on birds and not mammals. So in the 8 decades or so that these mosquitoes spent apart from the above ground ones, the underground mosquitoes had switched to preferring the blood of mammals instead of birds, probably because rats are more common than pigeons in their new habitat. And that's not the only difference between the underground mosquito and the species that it evolved from. Unlike the above ground version, the London Underground mosquito doesn't hibernate in the winter, and the females don't need blood in order to lay their eggs. In fact, the two types are now so genetically distinct that they can't mate and produce offspring or bring forth. So are the metro mosquitoes a new species? I would say yes. This is what you call allopatric speciation. But whatever you want to call it, researchers think it only took a few hundred mosquito generations for this new breed of mosquitoes to evolve. So is that an example of evolution? I would say that it is.
AJ, thank you very much for the introduction and also your first point for tonight's debate on evolution and evidence. Congratulations on the 8,000 subscribers, and I appreciate you being here for this event. So let's now hand it over to Dr. Kent, the science gent. Kent, how you doing tonight? A little bit about yourself, and then feel free to move into your first response to AtheistJunior's point.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. My name's Kent Hovind. I taught high school science and math 15 years. I'm in Lenox, Alabama, straight north of Pensacola, 70 miles. And we have a Christian camp, a science center, a museum, a theme park. Visitors come from all over the world. It's free and it's fun. We believe the Bible is true and evolution is the dumbest and most dangerous religious cult in the history of the world. Never been a dumber idea than to teach the kids we all came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago, which came from a dot of nothing exploding. And so I enjoy picking on the atheists sweetly in Christian love, trying to win them over. But meanwhile, what they're teaching is hurting many, many children. And it's just, I think, probably borders on criminal to teach them this evolution theory. It's nothing but a religion. There's no scientific evidence for evolution. A mosquito turning into a mosquito is not proof that the mosquito came from a rock. But the evolution theory does teach that. I think we need to carefully define what we're talking about since the debate is on evolution. The process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms. Well, that's kind of a sneaky way to say it, but that's not exactly what they mean by evolution, okay? Gradual development of something. Let's see. Process of gradual change that takes place over many generations, like AJ said, 40 generations, to go from a mosquito to a mosquito, during which species of animals slowly change some of their physical characteristics. Well, now that's not adding any new information. The mosquitoes already lived on blood. Now they're still living on blood. They've apparently learned or adapted to live on a different kind of blood. I think people could learn to live on nothing but vegetation if they wanted. You could probably live on just carrots if you wanted. So, definition of evolution. Define evolution as modern biology. Let's see, change in the inherited traits of a population. What he described is not evolution. It's a variation of the same thing. See, what they do all the time with this, Donnie, they confuse the 6 different levels of evolution. First, you'd have to have cosmic evolution, the origin of time, space, matter. Where did time, where did matter, where did space come from? Where did the universe come from? Secondly, the chemicals that came from this supposed Big Bang had to form in from all the other elements. You want to get gold and silver and platinum out of hydrogen? I'd like to see that, okay? Number 3, that have to be planets evolve and stars evolve. There are stars and there are planets. Nobody's ever seen one form. We see stars blow up once in a while. We never see one form. So they kind of avoid number 3, stellar evolution. Number 4 is the origin of life. See, AJ started with a mosquito that's already living. That's not really going to help. How did life get started? That's an essential part of the evolution theory. Number 5, macroevolution, changing from one kind of animal into another. He didn't give an example of that. He gave an example of a mosquito changing into a mosquito with a different diet. That's not real evolution. What he gave was what we call microevolution, a variation within the same kind. It's still a mosquito. I've been asking for decades, where's the evidence for evolution? There isn't any. What he gave was a classic example of microevolution, of which there are millions of examples. We shouldn't call it microevolution. We should call it a variation. That's what it really is. It's a variation of a mosquito. And the fact that they either can no longer interbreed or choose not to no longer interbreed, I don't know which it is, it's still a mosquito. Chihuahuas don't mate with Great Danes very much, but they're still both dog. They're at the extreme end of the spectrum of dog, but they're still dog. Man has selectively bred dogs to get nearly 350 varieties of dogs. They're still a dog. That doesn't prove dogs are related to potatoes. So what he's giving here, maybe he won't see it. He gave an example of exactly what God said would happen. They would bring forth after their kind. That's all that's ever happened. Mosquitoes always make baby mosquitoes, without exception. Tell you what, call me when those London mosquitoes turn into anything other than a mosquito. I want to see that. Doesn't happen, you're dreaming. AJ, you picked the wrong religion. You choose to believe in evolution. I'm sorry for that, but you shouldn't do that. What they do, though, they put them on family trees and show the humans and the birds and probably mosquitoes in here somewhere, ladybugs and trees, all coming from a common ancestor. This is not science. This is a religion. You see varieties of mosquitoes and then jump to a wild conclusion that all the forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor. Excuse me, is that teaching that mosquitoes and bananas are related and whales? Yes. Found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. This is pure imagination here. Then it says no traces of those events remain. Well, that's handy. It's not science if we can't observe it, study it, test it, demonstrate it. These family trees are nothing but imagination. Oh, here they got humans and plants. Got to be a mosquito in here somewhere. You can look for it yourself. Butterfly there, center left. So I'm sorry, AJ, try again. What you gave was a mosquito turning into a mosquito with a different diet. That is not going to prove we all came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. Go ahead.
Okay, Kent, thank you for the introduction and also your first response. AJ, before I hand it back to you, I do want to let the audience know as questions are coming in terms of who can join and when can people join. And so we're going to engage in a debate right now between Kent and AJ for about an hour. I'll say in about the 45-minute mark, I'll post the StreamYard join link in the chat, and anybody is welcome to join. The topic again is evolution and evidence. We just want to make sure that tonight remains professional. We're focusing on the topic, of course, and we're as cordial as possible. So with that, AJ, let's hand it back to you. Feel free to respond to whatever you'd like to, and maybe try and pick one major point. Obviously, we are focusing on the mosquito example right now, and we'll go with it. We'll try and keep it one topic at a time and as equally timed as possible. So, AJ, floor is yours.
Well, I'm not really sure how I can focus on one topic when Kent just gave a complete scattershot of different things. I mean, he talked about mosquitoes coming from rocks, not adding new information, variation, not evolution, 6 different types of evolution: cosmic, chemical, stellar, organic, microevolution, macroevolution, family trees, common ancestry, unicellular organisms. I mean, this is not focusing on one topic at a time. This is Kent throwing out as many things, as many topics as he can to try and muddy the water and confuse the actual discussion. So I'm willing to focus on one thing at a time if Kent will do that too. So you said that the mosquitoes didn't come from rocks. Kent, do you think that I think that rocks were living organisms at some point?
No, but you do believe living organisms came from a rock or from the non-living material, don't you, AJ?
How would a living organism come from a rock if a rock wasn't giving birth to something? A rock would have to be alive for something to come from a rock. It would have to give birth.
I have showed you.
Organism.
I have showed you many times, AJ. I've showed many evolutionists. The textbooks teach the Earth began as a hot ball of rock. Do you believe that? It was a hot ball of rock 4.6 billion years ago?
Sure. But we're talking about mosquitoes, not planetesimals.
I understand better than you think, okay? The Earth was a hot ball of rock. It cooled down and it rained on the rocks for millions of years and formed the oceans. And then in the oceans, the first living organisms appeared. Is that what you believe?
Do you think that I believe that rocks were alive at one point? Because I don't.
No, but did the rocks get rained on, dissolved into the water, and the oceans produced life? So the minerals that came from the rocks came alive. And where did life get started? Where'd your mosquito get started? You do believe it came from primordial soup. So this does tie right in. What you gave was the tail end of a process of a mosquito changing diet. That's not evolution. How did the life get started? Here you go. Primordial soup.
You're changing the topic, Kent. You're changing the topic from evolution to where did life originate from? That's a totally different topic.
Well, this is right. This is on target exactly, because you gave an example of a mosquito changing his diet. How did the mosquito get there in the first place? In London or anywhere else? Mosquitoes are more complex than a Corvette or a space shuttle. One mosquito is more complicated than the space shuttle. Study the mosquito anatomy, all the muscular structure, the exoskeleton, the spiracles, the digestive system, the circulatory system. It can fly, for heaven's sake. It's this big and can fly and can make babies. Do you really think the mosquito itself, any mosquito, above ground or below ground, created itself from what? What did the mosquito come from? That's why I show the family trees. You guys do believe we started off as a single-celled creature, and slowly, I found the mosquito in here.
And it's a different species. This is a different species that can no longer interbreed with the original species. That's speciation. That's evolution.
There you go.
By your definition of kind, it's a different kind too, because they can't bring forth anymore.
So if you're saying speciation is evolution, then you are saying exactly what I said. You are choosing what everybody else would call variation within the same kind, microevolution. I think it's obvious.
Scientists don't use the word kind. It's not a scientific term.
Well, the Bible uses the word quite a few times, and the word species has like 12 different definitions. I've given those many times in the debate. I could call it up if you'd like.
And the word kind has 0 definitions.
Oh, okay. If you don't like the Bible word kind, that's fine.
It's not scientific. The Bible's not scientific, nor is kind.
Okay. If they're capable of bringing forth, i.e. making babies, they would be the same kind. The animals know what their kind is. Turn all the animals loose in the woods. The raccoons go look for another raccoon to mate with. They don't look for a mosquito or a possum or a dog or anything. They know. They're smarter than the humans. But this chart, let's see, there's the protozoa, and up on the far left is the spiders and the insects. That would be the mosquitoes. Do you believe this chart should be taught to children in school? This came from a public school textbook showing that the spiders and the insects and the mosquitoes share a common ancestor with humans. Do you believe you share a common ancestor with mosquitoes?
Sure, but why do you think that the raccoons are smarter than humans?
We need to add you to my chart. Do I have you on here already?
No, I'm not on your board with pictures of men that are in hearts. I'm not on there.
Well, P.Z. Myers came from a fish, and Wade the Wizard came from a snail. So we'll put on here, AJ came from a mosquito, or is related to a mosquito, okay? Listen, you're welcome to believe that. But seeing a mosquito underground change his diet to feast on humans when that's the only thing down there to eat is not evidence that mosquitoes came from a protozoa. Do you believe mosquitoes came from a single-celled creature over billions, trillions, quadrillions of generations?
You already know the answer to that. And again, this is shifting the goalposts. So it's not just that the mosquitoes change their diet. The female mosquitoes of this subspecies no longer need blood in order to breed. That's not just changing the diet. And again, it's a different species. So this is an example of evolution.
Okay.
You can't tell me why it's not.
A mosquito changing its diet, and would it still be recognized
as a species?
Okay, is it still classified as a mosquito?
Yeah, it's still classified as a mosquito, but it's a different species.
Okay, so somebody decided, I don't think the mosquito cares how we classify it, okay?
Irrelevant.
Somebody decided to give it a new species name. Mosquito above groundosaurus and mosquito below groundosaurus, or whatever they called it. Okay, it's still a mosquito. I don't know how you can't see this. You're giving an example of a variation that is not evidence for evolution. These charts, which is I'm objecting to, show that everything has a common ancestor. That's simply not science.
You could never admit if something was evidence for evolution because it would contradict with your DVD series that you sell. So
well,
that would you could never admit that.
No, I'm not asking for my belief. I'm not demanding my belief be taught at taxpayer expense in all the schools. You guys are demanding that we teach this kind of stupid propaganda, these charts in the public schools.
Are you a taxpayer?
All the taxpayer. Oh, you want to change subject? Yes, AJ, I pay every tax I owe. But listen,
you're the one that brought it up.
No. Sure, I pay every tax I owe. If I owe it, I pay it. I paid gas tax a few minutes ago when I gassed up the Jeep. Now, the textbooks here show these family trees of everything going back to a single-celled creature. A mosquito going to a new species of mosquito is not going to help the evidence for this chart here. This is not science. That's all. I'm saying if you guys want to believe this, great. Believe whatever you want. But don't call that science. Putting these family trees, here we go. Got to have a mosquito on here. They got the humans and the eagles and the birds and the pine trees going back to a common ancestor. This is propaganda. This is not science. There's no scientific evidence of any single-celled creature becoming anything other than a single-celled creature. Bacteria make baby bacteria. Protozoa make baby protozoa. Amoeba make baby amoeba. There may be hundreds of varieties of protozoa, and there are. There may be dozens of varieties of mosquitoes. Somebody Google that, would you? How many varieties of mosquitoes are there? There may be hundreds. They're still mosquito, and they're always going to make baby mosquitoes. And if you think the underground mosquito wants to feast on humans and now maybe cannot even lay eggs unless it gets human blood, well, that's interesting. And you think that process, that change is enough that we should be required to teach that all the life forms came from a protozoa.
No,
because
you're moving the goalposts. You always do that. Somebody gives you an example of what they think is evidence, and you say, so this one piece of evidence is proof for you to think that we should teach family trees in textbooks. It's like, this is a totally different thing that you're just conflating. You're conflating a different topic. I would like to stay focused on one thing, but you always pivot to a different topic. It's like you're not comfortable talking about one thing at a time.
Oh, I'm very comfortable. AJ, one of my guys just Googled it. You can Google it yourself. There are 3,500 varieties of mosquitoes. I'd be willing to bet $5, but $4 is all I got, that they came from a common ancestor called a mosquito. But do you believe the mosquitoes, all 3,500 kinds, came from something like an amoeba, a single-celled creature like this chart shows? This chart shows everything coming from a single-celled creature. Do you believe this should be taught to kids as science?
You already know that I think that animals and living organisms have common ancestry. And yes, I do think it should be taught to children. I don't think your DVD series should be taught to children in public schools, which is what you want. You can deny it, but that is what you want. That's why you created a DVD called Public School Presentation, because you want to get your DVDs in public schools, and you want evolution taken out of the public school curriculum and creationism put in its place. It's obvious.
If I was in charge. No, if I was in charge, we would close down the public schools. Okay, the parents should teach their kids, right? So they certainly, if they're going to teach one religion like evolution, they should teach all religions. But they don't.
Evolution is not a religion, and the Supreme Court ruled that it's not.
No, the Supreme Court ruled you cannot require creation be taught. What's happening in the textbooks is they use lies, and I cover 50 some of them in my video series, lies in the textbooks. They cover lies. All they do is present different lies that have been disproven years ago, but they still keep them in the textbook. So you gave your best evidence. You started off this tonight saying a mosquito above ground went to the London Underground in the World War II or whatever and learned to live off of human blood. And now somebody decided to call it a new species of mosquito. Okay, there are 3,500 species of mosquitoes. Now we have 3,501. Okay, so is that your best evidence for these charts that humans and turtles and birds are related? Is that, you're supposed to give your best evidence? Is that the best you got?
No, I never claimed that I was giving my best evidence, nor is there one singular line of evidence that's the best evidence for evolution. What's the best evidence for evolution is the fact that so many different scientific fields cross-confirm each other, even though the fields are totally unrelated, like the dates provided by radiometric dating and dating tree rings. I couldn't think of the name. Dendrochronology. The dates line up, and there's lots of different fields of science that line up to cross-confirm evolution. So that's what the best line of evidence is. It's not one example, because you want it to be one example, so then you can try and debunk that example and say, look, there's no evidence. But there's lots of different fields of science that cross-confirm each other and confirm evolution.
Okay. Probably every major religion in the world uses your same argument. The Hindus use arguments that all the millions of people believe in Hinduism, and lots of people, they look things for evidence for it. Same thing with Muslims, Islam. They would say, well, look how many millions of Muslims there are. They all believe in it. Look at the evidence. Wow, Muhammad saw a rock fall down, and they got it in a box. It's in the box right now in Saudi Arabia. That's proof. They're all giving this. I would like to see your best scientific evidence, not just saying, and what you gave, you said the different fields cross over and the dates line up. What you're doing is working on one major problem that you have, trying to get billions of years. Because you know full well, if you cannot have billions of years, your whole chart really looks silly. To change from a mosquito that lives on animal blood to a mosquito that lives on human blood below ground in London is still a mosquito. There's now 3,501, okay? And there's still a mosquito. But you think that is a bit of evidence that we should all say, wow, that proves mosquitoes are related to jellyfish and frogs and starfish and humans. And you think these charts are part of science. And now you're saying stuff about dates and tree ring dating. How does that help their chart here? Even if it was billions of years. We've never seen any animal change to any other kind of animal. The mosquito didn't change to a new kind of animal. Tell you what, put them both in front of a kindergartner. Say, what is this one? That's a mosquito. What is this one? That's a mosquito. A kindergartner can know the difference. You may not, but they can help you. They know it's still a mosquito. It didn't change, and it didn't change species. And using the word species is dangerous because, like I said, there's 7 different definitions. I've given them to you before. Exactly what is a species? It's kind of a nebulous term. They're obviously still, they look like a mosquito. They fly like a mosquito. And any changes that they get is going to be a loss of information, not a gain. Did they gain the ability to do something mosquitoes couldn't do before? Could mosquitoes live on human blood before? I bet they did. They maybe didn't like it as well, but so they learned to live on it. I'll have to study that out. I will, believe me, okay? But
No,
what you're giving an example of a mosquito turning into a mosquito. And I'm sorry.
It
can't
interbreed anymore, Kent. So by your definition of kind and by the definition of speciation, this is a new species. Therefore, it's speciation, which is defined as macroevolution. So that's the way scientists define it, not 5-year-olds. We don't really go by what 5-year-olds think in science.
So the 2 types of mosquitoes can no longer interbreed. I think this happens with thousands of examples of animals. I think that happens with cows. There are 450 varieties of cows now, and maybe some of them can no longer interbreed. Maybe they've lost genetic code. Maybe one kind can't breed with the other. But it's always a loss of information. I'll research it, okay? But I'd be willing to bet the mosquitoes in London underground lost some information so they can no longer interbreed. They did not gain anything.
What is information? What is information?
Okay, the DNA code.
So they lost some of their DNA code?
I don't know. I'll find out. But I'd be willing to bet any animals that lose, it's all we've seen in life is animals losing DNA code. Something gets scrambled or goes wrong.
I would be willing to bet that they lost information, but you don't know. That doesn't make sense. You'd be willing to bet money on something you don't know?
Yeah, I'd bet money that they lost information. They didn't gain anything.
But you don't know if they lost information or not.
That's all we've ever seen.
You don't know what the information is.
Okay, I've studied this in many other animals and plants, and they lost information. And they may lose enough where they can no longer be interfertile. Okay? But it's still the same kind. Anybody would call it the same kind.
So they lost some of their DNA code. Which part specifically of their DNA code did they lose?
Read my lips. I did not study this one yet, AJ. I will study the mosquito for you. All the other ones I have studied lost information.
So you're sure enough to bet your money on it, but you don't know because you haven't studied it? You just guessing?
Absolutely. I am so sure that this book is true and they will always bring forth after their kind. I'd bet my money on that, all $4. Okay.
That's your bias. That's where your bias comes in.
Okay. I'll make it 10 just for you. Can somebody loan me $5 so I can make it 10? 5. Okay. We got $10 now. Okay. All right. Now what's your next? So your mosquito turning into a mosquito. What else do you have, AJ, that would make anybody want to believe and be forced to teach this chart to all the kids in the school system? You think your mosquito turning into a mosquito? What now?
No one's forced to teach it.
Kids aren't forced. Who pays for these books with these charts?
Not you.
Property tax pays for school. Don't lie about me. I pay every tax I owe.
Property tax. You don't have to pay property tax because you're a 501c3 nonprofit organization.
Okay, well, good enough.
You're a religious ministry.
And who voted to allow churches to be tax exempt?
You decided to sign up to be a 501c3.
Okay, let's see. Donnie, we are way off topic here. I'd like him to give his next best evidence for evolution. It's perfectly legitimate. Are universities 501c3 or 508 or some other number? Do the universities pay property tax on their property? No.
Not as a religious exemption. They don't.
No.
Not as a religious exemption. No.
Do they pay property tax? Was the question.
Yes, but not as a they don't. They aren't excused from it by a religious exemption.
Wait, the public schools and the public universities in your county pay property tax? Is that what you're telling me?
No, the homeowners pay property taxes, which go to pay for the public schools.
Bingo.
But if an organization if they're excused from paying taxes, it's not because of a religious reason. That's what I was saying.
Is there any reason they can be excused from paying property tax?
Yeah, if they're a nonprofit organization because they're a charity, that's one example.
Gentlemen, it's nice that we got some property tax debate in there, but let's now really utilize our time here. Evolution and evidence. Great back and forth on the mosquito example. AJ, if you felt it was a good idea, maybe we can move on to a secondary topic and then we'll kind of go back and forth. on that for a bit. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, so Kent, you have a very hard time understanding the concept of the age of rock layers in the geologic column. And just ask your question that you always ask, like, are they coming from outer space? Just ask it. Your question about where do the materials come from? Just ask me the question.
Well, part of your essential ingredient for evolution is time, billions of years. I think everybody would agree. If somebody told you that you kissed a frog, it turns to a prince. That's a fairy tale. But now, if you wait billions of years, the frog can turn to a prince. So I have said many times that the geologic column does not exist anywhere in the world, and that all of those layers are the same age. If the top layer is younger, if the Holocene is only 10,000 years old, where were all these billions of tons of dirt waiting for 2.5 billion years before they landed on the Earth? They're claiming in the textbook the bottom layer is 2.5 billion, but the top layer is only 10,000. So where was all that dirt sitting around for, let's see, 2.499990 billion years?
Okay. Do you know how limestone forms? Do you know how limestone forms?
I'm familiar with how all the different most of the different rock layers form. I taught earth science 15 years. My point is, you're evading it here, is if the top layer is younger, where did it come from? If it got reformed and
with an example.
No, if I
how
take
does limestone form?
From lime.
I'm trying to.
Okay.
But what is the process of layers of limestone forming? How does it form?
Well, there are probably 50 different layers of limestone in our so-called geologic column. I'll show them to you here. They have Jurassic limestone, Cambrian limestone, all the different limestones. How do you know the age of the different layers? You're the one changing the subject now. The layers of the Earth all form rapidly, and all the layers are the same age. And we're off topic for evolution, but this is all over the world. Petrified trees are found standing up. You atheists never answer this. Here we have a tree standing up, connecting all the layers. They're common. They're found by the thousands. There's hundreds and hundreds of them just up here in Tennessee. Here's me standing by one in Yellowstone. Petrified trees that are standing up, running through different layers, ought to wake you guys up to say, wait a minute, these layers all formed very quickly around a standing tree. A tree is only going to last a year or two, a dead tree, and there's overwhelming evidence the layers are not different ages. But your whole religion is based on that stupid geologic column that the layers are different ages. Go to Joggins, Nova Scotia. They have hundreds of petrified trees standing up, running through the layers that you claim are different ages. They're not.
You said that stellar evolution and cosmic evolution is a type of evolution, or is a definition of evolution. Therefore, the formation of planet Earth and the layers within the geologic column should be relevant on a debate about evolution, according to your definition, even though I don't agree with it. So sure. You taught earth science, but you can't tell me how limestone forms. Why is that?
Well, tell me then. Let's get on one topic here. You wanted to know if the layers are different ages. Here we have. Well, it's drawing. That's a drawing. I got pictures here. No, back up. Actual photographs of trees standing up, petrified, running through multiple layers. Are the layers different ages?
Okay, so I was trying to answer your question with an example, because I was going to say, but apparently you don't know. The way limestone forms is that organisms that have shells that are made of calcium carbonate live and die in the ocean by the millions or billions. Then they sink down because of gravity to the ocean floor in massive numbers. And all those layers, that big layer of shells gets compressed by geologic processes. And it's made up of chalk, basically. And that compression forms the rock layers of limestone. So when you ask where is the material coming from, that's one answer, because it's new living organisms are born, they reproduce. So that's your source of where material is coming from in the example of limestone. That's how I was trying to answer your question.
Okay. Yeah, I understand the difference between limestone, talc, and chalk, and all those different things. I've been to the chalk cliffs of Dover. I've been to the talc fields in diatomaceous earth fields in California. These layers, though, is there any place where they're forming today in massive numbers? Like we find huge layers of chalk and talc, and they make talcum powder out of it. And I think during Noah's flood, when the fountains of the deep broke open, the hot water coming out would kill all the microorganisms within 50 miles, and they would snow to the bottom and make layers 100 feet thick of chalk and talc and limestone. All the layers formed quickly because of Noah's flood, and the evidence for that is staring you in the face. The trees are standing up, running through all the layers. The layers had to form quickly. Dead trees only stand around for a year or two and they fall over. We got petrified tree from a standing log in our museum here, still has the bark on it. A friend of mine works at a coal mine in Birmingham, north of here. They find petrified trees standing up all the time. He said, "Do you want one for your museum?" I said, "Well, yeah, of course. Who would not want a petrified tree?" So you're not answering my question. If the layers are running through different ages, and they are, why do you claim that layers are different ages? How long do dead trees stand up where you live?
Okay, so
go ahead, avoid the question. I'm ready. Avoid the question.
I'm literally trying to answer it if you would stop gish galloping. So you always ask, how can the layers be different ages? It's not the material in the layer that is given an age. It's the layer itself. So you have the concept of nouns, right? A noun is a thing. So the material, the limestone that makes up the layer is different than the actual layer itself. So once that layer of limestone forms, the clock starts at 0. So when we say layers are different ages, we're not saying the rock that makes up the layer is this old, because yeah, I would say they are the same age. It's when did the layer form? When did that concretion form? That layer, that's what we're talking about when we say different ages.
What I'm trying to get you to see how silly that is. Here is a tree standing up, running through probably 15 different layers. Is each of those layers a different age?
It's not running through 15 different geological layers. I can guarantee you that. And they're not in all the layers. You said that they're polystrata trees running through all the layers. That's not true. There's not ones running through every single layer.
Okay. Well, there are petrified trees running through 2 completely different seams of coal, the Mary Lee Formation and the Blue Creek. These are up in Birmingham area, and they have lots of petrified trees standing up. And they take sample H and find out it runs through the Mary Lee Foundation as well as many layers under it. And sample A runs through the Blue Creek, and yet they're connected. Huh.
But none of those are running through both formations.
I think
Are they?
A freshman law student could argue, Your Honor, it's obvious these layers had to form very quickly. And the fact that A runs through the middle layer and H runs through the middle layer, how long did the tree stand there? I'd say the Mary Lee and the Blue Creek Formation had to form very quickly within rapid sequence of each other. 1 year Noah's flood is I think, the best answer, but I'm not demanding that be taught. But you guys want to say the Mary Lee Formation is millions of years different in age. Then, according to your religion, the Blue Creek is coal made from a forest that got trampled or smashed down, and then the layers formed on top, and a whole new forest grew to make the Mary Lee Formation. A whole new forest. And yet we have dead trees connecting them. This isn't common sense.
It doesn't have to be a forest, because the way that coal formed during the Carboniferous era was that you had vascular plants, which are plants that can grow vertically and suck water up, as opposed to algae, which just lays horizontally on top of water. And you had those vascular plants for the first time, and those lived and died in massive numbers, and they fell over and were compressed. And that's what formed coal. It doesn't have to be entire forests to form coal.
Okay, so the vascular plants fell over and formed a layer of coal in time before the tree rotted. Because here's one, same tree connecting both layers. Tell you what, called Dan Nelson. He works up there, one of the foremen. He was years ago up in Tennessee. And he's in Cookeville, Tennessee. They used the mines for digging coal. The highway department widened the road and found hundreds and hundreds of petrified trees running through 2 seams of coal that are separated by, 15 feet of rock layers. So we're off topic a little bit, but I know your question about the geologic column, I take the position there is no geologic column. All the layers formed in 1 year, Noah's flood. If you wish to believe that the layers are different ages and they represent millions of years, that's your belief. It's not common sense. If there's any sorting to the animals found in these layers, it would be from a flood. Birds are found on top. Birds have hollow bones. They're the last ones to die in a flood. Do you agree there is, in the Cenozoic period, there are layers of limestone, and in the Mesozoic, there are layers of limestone? How do you tell the difference between Mesozoic limestone and Cenozoic limestone?
Okay, I'll respond to that, but I want to respond to something that you just said. So where are the flightless birds found? Are they found at the top with the birds that can fly?
Well, in a flood, it doesn't sort. It sorts animals a little bit, but animals can be found anywhere buried from a flood. I point out clams are generally found at the lower levels of the layers because clams already live at the bottom when the flood starts. That's where they live. Okay, so of course they'd be the first ones buried. And I pointed out many times, and you guys avoid it like the plague. Clams by the millions are found petrified in the closed position, had to be buried alive. These are found by the millions. We've got hundreds and hundreds of them here in our museum. So, and these are found on top, they find like these on top of the tall mountains. Mount Everest is covered in clams. So my position is your geologic column, this is your Bible, I know, but it doesn't exist anywhere except in the imagination. It was made up in 1830. And the fact that we have petrified trees connecting multiple layers nullifies the geologic column. And the fact that the layers are sorted a little bit is common sense. You can shake up a jar of dirt, rocks, mud, and gravel. It'll sort itself right in your hand. You can watch it happen.
I actually tried that experiment myself, and it didn't sort into layers. Everything just mixed together.
Oh, you got the wrong mud. Come on down to Dinosaur Adventureland. We got special mud. Automatically sorts into layers.
But you didn't answer my question. So where are the flightless birds sorted?
Where do the what?
Where are the flightless birds sorted? Are they at the top with the birds that can fly, or are they at the clams who are at the bottom, but simultaneously also on Mount Everest?
Okay, I didn't understand your verbiage. Flightless birds, okay?
Yeah, birds that can't fly.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, where are they found? I don't know where the flightless birds are found. Let's see. Wouldn't matter. They can be found anywhere after a flood. If there was a flood that wiped out a village, where would all the 7-Elevens be found? Or the scattered all through the place, okay? Where would all the telephone poles be found? I don't know. It's a flood, man. It messes things up bad. So I think your geologic column is your Bible, and I'm sorry you chose to believe that, but it doesn't exist. And there's evidence that the layers aren't different ages. I showed you the trees. I don't know what else you want.
You don't want to have it both ways, Kent. So you said that the flood sorts things with the birds at the top because they can fly, the clams at the bottom because they were already at the bottom, even though we also find them on Mount Everest. But then when I ask you where the flightless birds are, you say, well, I don't know. It was a flood. They could be sorted anywhere. Like your answer just changes depending on who's asking or what question is being asked. So you really don't know, but you're acting like you do.
I've tried to be careful to answer this for many years. Generally, clams are found at the bottom. Generally, birds are found at the top. But a flood messes everything up. I think if there was a flood that wiped out a village anywhere today, generally the wood from the houses would be found at a higher level than the bricks from the houses. But not always. It's a common density thing. Clam shells are heavier than bird feathers. So yes, there is a little bit of sorting, but it's only because of common sense. Body density based upon their habitat, based upon their mobility. Clams can't run very fast. But why are you defending the geologic column so much? I know this is your Bible, but you're supposed to be giving evidence for evolution. Does this column give evidence for evolution?
It's part of the evidence, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so I don't understand how you say, so you do think that there are layers on the earth. How is it that there's no geologic column then? Because that's what the geologic column is.
Well, no, there are layers to the earth, no question. I'm saying they all form quickly. I'm not saying there aren't layers. Of course there are layers.
How do you know they form quickly?
I just got done telling you, Noah's flood. If you shake up a jar of Alabama mud, it separates automatically into gravel at the bottom, then silt, and then clay. Our whole gravel pit where I live is 7 layers of gravel that are gravel, sand, clay, gravel, sand, clay. They go from here to North Carolina. There are thousands of gravel pits between here and North Carolina, all digging from the same 7 seams of gravel. They can predict it. They know if they drill down 16.5 feet, they're going to hit a layer of gravel. And it do. So I'm saying when you get layers of gravel going from Alabama to North Carolina, 500 miles. They all formed because of the same thing, one big flood. Just the tidal action going up and down, sucking water in and out sideways would make these layers. From here to North Carolina is 500 miles. Well, at this latitude, at where we are, 31 degrees north, we're turning 886 miles an hour this way, okay? If the moon is holding a bump of water during Noah's flood, like the moon holds a bump of water now while we turn, water is constantly being sucked into that bump by moon's gravity at the same speed the Earth is turning. At the North Pole, the Earth is turning 0. At the equator, 1,037.6, depending on your altitude. Here in Lennox, 883 miles an hour. If the water's going sideways at 900 miles an hour, it's going to make a bunch of layers in a hurry. I think it made a layer of gravel from North Carolina to Alabama in 45 minutes because the water's moving 900 miles an hour at this latitude. So
if the Earth is moving 900 miles an hour, if it's rotating at that speed, it doesn't feel like that to the person on Earth. From our perspective, it doesn't feel like we're moving 900 miles an hour. Like, it doesn't feel like that right now, does it? So the water wouldn't be moving that fast either.
You should have taken my earth science class. If the moon is holding a bump of water, which it is, the high tide, and the Earth is turning, the bump stays under the moon. So where does all the extra water come from to keep the bump full? All four sides. And from one side, it's pulling it in at the same speed the Earth is turning the other way. At the equator, it's going over 1,000 miles an hour. The water is coming in to fill that bump at 1,000 miles an hour. At the North Pole, it's 0, okay? And it graduated. I could send me your latitude, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. I taught trig, okay? My point is, if the continents were not on the Earth, if they were pushed down and the Earth is covered in water, then you get a phenomenon called the harmonic tide. If the tide didn't bang into Florida and North America, the tide could become harmonic and would go up and down 200 feet every 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes. If the water's coming up 200 feet in 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes, it's coming in from the east at the same speed your Earth is turning, depending on your latitude. So up to 1,000 miles an hour. Yes, anybody taught earth science or studied earth science should know that. The hydrologic sorting would happen rapidly from the sideways movement of the water. Google experiments in stratification by the French guy, who has a big long name. He went to Colorado to the Navy flume they've got there, huge glass line flume, and poured in different sediments in moving water. And you can see 8 or 10 layers form sideways. The layers of the Earth form horizontally, not vertically. The layers of the Earth are all formed in 1 year, not millions of years. And I'm sorry, your geologic column is your Bible, and it's only found in the textbooks. This guy admitted it.
So,
if there were a column
they form vertically in your sand art toy, though, don't they?
No, the vertically,
they don't.
They'll form 8 or 10 layers horizontally.
But in your sand art toy?
I didn't hear your words there. What now?
Do the layers form vertically in your sand art toy or horizontally?
I missed 2 words. In sand art, okay. In the sand art toy, okay.
Yeah,
this is going to make probably 20 or 30 layers in a matter of a few minutes. Is the top layer younger in here, AJ?
It formed at a different time than the layer below it formed. But my question was, do the layers form horizontally or vertically in that sand art toy?
Well, if they're moving fast enough horizontally, they would form horizontally. You can watch it happen. Let me get it to go. It's been sitting a while on my desk. But yeah, as it flows, it'll make several layers at the same time. Now, Google experiments in stratification and watch it on a much bigger scale. This thing's only 5 inches. It's making a bunch of layers now. Look at that. They're forming horizontally. They sure are.
No, the sand is flowing from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
So they're forming vertically.
So you're struggling here you're trying to defend your geologic column. The experts will admit, like this earth science book, put it way back up, brother. If there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. There is no geologic column.
Sentence? You skipped over a sentence right in the middle there. Why didn't you read the words in between?
Just for you, AJ, every letter, every vowel, okay?
Well, it's dishonest to just act like it was.
if it's not an act, okay, I really am. If there were a column of sediments deposited continuously since the formation of the Earth, the entire history of the planet could be reconstructed. Unfortunately, no such column exists. Well,
right.
what?
So if there was a column that was deposited since the formation of the Earth, then we could reconstruct the entire geologic column, but that doesn't exist. But you just read it as if there were a column of sediments. Unfortunately, no such column exists. That's dishonest because you're framing it like if there was a geologic column, but it doesn't exist because you just cut out the information in the middle. That's dishonest.
This textbook author, public school author, certainly believes there is a geologic column in that we should teach the kids. I mean, he's teaching it in his book here. The book's right here on my shelf. But I'm pointing out, he said, if there were a column deposited continuously since the formation of the Earth, the whole history of the planet could be reconstructed. Unfortunately, no such column exists. There is no geologic column.
There's a geologic column, but there are parts of it that are missing, and we call those unconformities. That doesn't mean we can't study what remains. And I know we have limited time here, so I want to just ask a question before, Donnie brings in the other people. So you said that, mosquitoes always have baby mosquitoes. So do you think that evolution teaches that animals will give birth to a different species than their own?
Do you think the mosquitoes in London gave birth to a different species of mosquito?
No, I don't. Do you think evolution teaches that?
You just said they did.
No,
you said the above ground mosquitoes gave birth to a different kind of mosquito.
I never said that.
Did the underground London mosquitoes come from the above ground London mosquitoes?
It's different than one mosquito giving birth to a different species. There's a distinction, but you're not focusing on the details because you're trying to misrepresent evolution.
You claim that a whole population of mosquitoes became a new species, but they came from the previous population of mosquitoes that was above ground. So
and I said how many generations it took for it to happen. I did not say that one species gave birth to another. You're misrepresenting me like you misrepresent evolution and science.
So did it? I don't misrepresent science. I misrepresent.
Yes, you do. Evolution. It's your career. It's what you do all day long.
So I think if you would go back and listen to what you said, AJ, you said this population of underground mosquitoes is now a new species, and it came from the ones that were above ground. Whether it took one generation or 5,000 generations, you're still claiming it. So it's slowly, gradually. At what point, which generation was no longer interfertile with the one before it?
That's not how evolution works, Ken. It's a gradient. So the only way to see, it's a gradient. It's like if you have a bucket of water and you add red food coloring to it, and then I slowly, drop by drop, add blue food coloring to it. Which drop turned it purple? Well, I couldn't tell you because it happened gradually. Just same thing with speciation.
I think if you, as I said, if you would give those mosquitoes both different species 50 generations apart, let a 5-year-old tell you they're both still a mosquito. Do you think that is sufficient evidence that we should teach these charts and make these family trees that all the mosquitoes, they'd fit on here someplace, and humans and birds and all the insects and reptiles, there they are. Well, we'll call that ladybug insect, represent the mosquito. They had a common ancestor with the trees and the worms. You think seeing the mosquito in London change slowly, gradually over many generations to a new mosquito diet is enough evidence that we should teach this chart to kids in public school and we should all be forced to pay for it?
Well, like I said, I didn't claim that this was the only line of evidence that convinced me. So the evidence is the fact that animals, all organisms on Earth share the same code, which is DNA. And we can look at the genetics and compare which animals have more of the same letters in their nucleotide sequences, the more similarities in their DNA, just the same way that you would do a pregnancy test to confirm if somebody is the father of a child or not. The same way you can confirm how closely related different organisms are to each other, whether it's dogs or it's dogs and like hyenas, or going even farther than that. And yes, it goes all the way to dogs and humans and vegetables. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but things that are unintuitive can still be true. And saying something isn't science because it's not common sense. Well, common sense tells us when I go outside and I look at the horizon, it looks flat. So common sense tells me that the earth is flat, but it's not true. It's not until you go and you look higher than that and you can get high enough to see the curvature of the earth and you get more information that you realize that your common sense actually led you to the wrong answer.
Okay. I think if you get higher and look at it, you see that the mosquitoes you're seeing are still mosquitoes. And that's not evidence that the mosquitoes are related to cows. You might believe that they are, but I got my definitions of species here. Look at this. Species, definition, type, kind, sort. Well, the Bible uses the word kind. Wow. Kind, a species, invective of once tough and suave. Okay, let's see. Bible said after their kind. That's the word they used 400 years ago, and I think everybody understood it. They bring forth after their kind. 10 species of crows might have had a common ancestor called a crow, and they're still bringing forth after their kind. So the textbook definition of species does often include the word kind. I'll show you got a bunch more in here if you want to get back on that one. Simple definition of species. Biological species, group of organisms can reproduce with one another in nature and can produce fertile offspring. Okay, that's Nature magazine. Group of similar living things that ranks below genus, able to produce offspring with one another. Okay. Species. Often defined as the largest group of organisms in which any two individuals of appropriate sexes or mating types can produce fertile offspring. Species. Biology. Related organisms that share characteristics that are capable of interbreeding. Okay. Carolus Linnaeus made up this classification system that we currently use. We've been modified it many times. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Genus, okay? Family. What's a kind? Generally, let's see, I've got the definition. Species, group of organisms. Kind, sort, genus, family, kind. Group of organisms potentially can interbreed. So you're picking out a straw here about the word kind. If you don't like the word Bible, word kind, maybe you don't like the Bible at all. That's your business. But the Bible says they will bring forth after their kind. Are you claiming these mosquitoes slowly over many generations brought forth something that anybody would consider a different kind or a different sort?
Yeah, they're different species. And that definition that you showed for species seems pretty simple to me. In fact, it seems almost identical to your definition of kind.
Bingo.
Is a kind of species?
Look at this. Are those mosquitoes a different type of creature? Are they a different kind? Are they a different sort? Are they a different race or breed? You're desperate, AJ. Your mosquitoes in London are still a mosquito. But you want to use that as evidence to make all the kids learn that mosquitoes are related to whales. Don't you?
So the way that Google is using the word kind is not the biblical version of the word. They're using just the general definition of kind. And again, this isn't the only line of evidence that I think proves that evolution is true and should be taught. The evidence is the fact that animals, all organisms on Earth, have similarities in their nucleotide sequences, in their DNA structures. The same way that you would do a parental test to confirm that your son is your son is the same way that we can compare DNA of different organisms and show that they are in fact related. That's the evidence.
I would agree. I think we could do a DNA test and prove that my children are my children. And I think we could do a DNA test and find that probably all humans might have had a common ancestor that was a human. But is that evidence that humans and mosquitoes are related? The fact that this DNA code, which is more complex code than anything man's ever written and all the computers in the world combined, DNA code is really complicated. It's more complex than the whole space shuttle, the whole space program. And you think it happened by chance. Nobody designed the DNA code. I'm sorry, I don't think that's logical. The probability of getting 5 royal flushes in a row is real slim. If that happened, you would conclude the game is rigged. The probability of functional sequence of amino acids is worse than that. To get a single cell without an intelligent designer is, let's see, 1 in 10 to the 57,600th power. It's dreaming. And you're welcome to believe that. I don't care what you believe, but it's not science. And I don't want to pay for it to be taught in science class. It should be taught in a religion class, if anything, evolution is nothing but a religion that people believe in. The chances of getting this DNA code to happen with no designer, I mean, look at that thing. Study a chromosome under the microscope, for heaven's sake. And you really think it happened by chance?
No.
This is a 4-letter code, ACATG. Our binary code for our computers is just, zeros and ones, only 2-dimensional code, 2-bit code. A 4-bit code is lots more complicated. And all the DNA is written in a 4-bit code. And the fact that there are similarities proves the same guy's writing the code. I bet Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint have millions of lines of identical code. Does that prove nobody's writing it? The fact that a mosquito and a human might have some identical lines of code. Okay, maybe they need to breathe air and get it into their through their spiracles and absorb it into their bloodstream. And that requires a code for the protein, for the red blood cells to attach to the oxygen. We might have the same code as far as attaching oxygen because we have to do the same thing. That's not ancestry, that's design. The same God designed the mosquito and the human. Why are you running from him, AJ?
Well, then I think it was a mistake. If God designed the mosquito, then I think that was a mistake.
Okay. He made them to be frog food, okay? The frogs seem to like them. All right, so your evidence so far. You said the geologic column is evidence for evolution. I said it doesn't exist anywhere. You said the mosquito becoming a mosquito with a different diet is evidence. And you said all the DNA is similar. I countered and said all the DNA is too complex. The fact that there are similarities could be a same designer. It's not proof of a common ancestor. Anybody would, I think, with the one eyeball would have to say, yeah, you're right. It could go either way. It could be common ancestor or common designer. If I showed you a book that had 7 pages of identical text, word for word, letter for letter, exactly the same as 7 pages in some other book, you'd say, well, somebody plagiarized this, or the same guy wrote the book. Maybe that's the way he talked. You can tell an author sometimes just by the way they write. Oh, I know that. I read that guy before. So authors often have a way of talking.
If I had 2 books that had the same things written in them, 2 different people could have written them. It wouldn't tell me that the same guy wrote both books.
No, but
I don't see how you're drawing that conclusion.
Well, yeah, like I said, if 2 people wrote different books, 2 different people, and never corresponded with each other, but they all came up with 7 pages in a row that were letter for letter the same, I think that'd be fishy. I think somebody would say, excuse me, this is evidence of plagiarism, or this author's using a different name. 7 pages in a row, every letter the same. We got DNA code like that. That's the same author writing the code. That's all. You don't like that author? Okay, do what you want with your life. But don't call it science to claim that a mosquito producing a mosquito with a different diet is evidence that cows and humans came from a common ancestor. That's not common sense.
If I have a program on my computer that generates random numbers, it could generate a number that's really big and extremely complicated, but it wouldn't be designed. It would just have been randomly generated. So just because something's complicated doesn't mean that it automatically had a designer.
Was the computer that did all this designed? Was the code that made the randomly generated? Somebody had to write a code to do that. Was that code designed?
That's
you got to
moving
design
the
the computer
goalposts.
and then you got to print
That's
it out on the
irrelevant to my
screen.
example.
Was the screen you're reading this on, was that screen designed?
You always move the goalposts. Why do you do that? Like, you can't just focus on one example.
Were your eyes and brain designed to be able to understand what the computer is showing you? I'm trying to get you to understand, AJ. I would like to win you over to the Lord. I think you're headed for trouble with Judgment Day, and I'm trying to avoid that. You don't, maybe not interested, but I think the evidence is overwhelming. There is no evidence that all the creatures on planet Earth have the common ancestor like these charts show. This isn't science. This is religion. You can believe that if you want. Humans and look at that. What's that? Seaweed. Wow. And sharks and ferns and starfish and octopus have a common ancestor. This isn't science. This is a religious textbook right here, teaching their religion that all life forms have a common ancestor. And I'm asking, where's the evidence? Why should I believe something like that? Why do you believe something like that?
Can something not be scientific if it's religious?
I guess I don't understand that question completely.
If something is religious, does that mean it's automatically not science?
Oh, I think my religion is perfectly scientifically correct. Okay. But science is knowledge. The definition of science is, look it up, knowledge gained by observation, experimentation, testing. Where's the observation of the mosquito becoming something other than a mosquito? Where's the observation of a mosquito coming from a single-celled creature? Where's the observation for where's the testing? They would test it. Get a bunch of amoeba or protozoa or bacteria, whatever single-cell creature you want to start with, and turn it into something else. They're showing it turning into sharks and octopus. Show me that in the laboratory. This isn't repeatable experiment. This isn't science. This chart is religion, and you're welcome to it, but it's not science. Science is, look it up, the definition of science. Science, things that we can observe, study, test, and demonstrate. Knowledge gained from using observation, experiments to describe and explain the world. Where's the observation? Let me get another definition here. All right, science. Science, from the Latin word "ser," knowledge. What do we know? Testable explanations. Well, test it. Turn your amoeba into a mosquito. You turned a mosquito into a mosquito. I want to see you turn an amoeba to a mosquito.
That's obviously ridiculous.
Right. Bingo. You're getting it. It is obviously.
Yeah, your definition of evolution is stupid and nonsensical. I agree.
No, my definition of science is, look, Google definition of science. Let's see. Science is knowledge. Knowledge gained through study and practice. A system of acquiring knowledge. Observation.
Then why do you think you know better than the scientists? Why do you think you know better than all the scientists then?
Why what now?
Because they disagree with you. Why do you think that you know better than all the scientists then? Because they disagree
not
with
all
you.
of them. No, AJ. All the ones that agree with me are right. Okay. I don't disagree with all of them. Okay. We've gone over an hour, Sam and Donnie, but we've gone over an hour here. So I stick by my guns. Science is what we can observe. Every farmer on the planet will tell you he can observe his cows make baby cows. He does not observe these charts you show with the cow coming from an amoeba. Nobody's ever seen that. And you're going to say it happens too slowly to see. Well, then it's not science. Even if it's true, it wouldn't be science because it's not observable, testable, demonstrable. Practice it, study it.
If something isn't able to be observed in a human lifetime, that means it's not science?
How many generations of farmers have there been that'll tell you the same thing? Great grandpa crossbred his cows and they made a baby cow every time. Do you think cows came from an amoeba or a single-celled creature? Where's your evidence for that?
Gentlemen, if you wanted to maybe wrap it up, we just hit the hour and 8-minute mark, and we've got a packed house backstage. AJ and Kent, excellent discussion. I really enjoyed that. Very free-flowing and a lot of fun. So you guys also made it easy to moderate for Sam and I. So, okay, AJ, of course, you know, this is your show as well because it's you versus Kent. And so feel free to stick around during the open mic. And if you want to, you know, bring up points and respond as well, feel free to do so. Okay, here we go. Actually, before I bring in the first person, I'll let the audience know. I posted the link in the live chat about maybe 5 or 6 minutes ago. I've also pinned it. So feel free to join. If I'm not familiar with who you are, I just want to make sure I got to vet you before I bring you in. So the couple people I see backstage who just have a profile handle, basically, turn on your webcam, just give me a wave, just so I know you're legit and not a troll. And then you can turn your webcam back off, and then I'll bring you in. Okay. So with that, okay, let's bring in our first guest, Jackson Rowe. So Kent, we got all your best friends again here tonight for some impromptu debate. So as a matter of fact, Jackson, I think it's in a couple of weeks, you are going to be doing the first hour debate with Kent for our open mic. On August 10th, we're going to be having James W. and Amy Newman. They're going to be engaging Kent for the first hour. Jackson Rowe, we're going to have you after that. And then we've also got a show with Ken Rock. So for people who love the open mic debate challenge nights, we've got plenty more for you. Okay, Jackson, feel free. I know you've listened, I think, to the majority of the debate that just went on. And so feel free to bring up a point or topic, and we'll have Kent address it.
All right. I have a lot of notes, but most of it's about mosquitoes. So I'm going to skip over that part. I'm going to go straight to geologic column, radiometric dating. I'll talk more about that at the actual debate we have scheduled. But here's one example of just a fossil I found. This is called, you probably can't see it very well. My camera's kind of terrible. This is called a calamite horsetail. These are only found in Carboniferous and Permian strata. And I didn't know where I was digging, and I found it. And sure enough, I looked on the geologic map of Arkansas, and it's Carboniferous. So that just goes to show you how reliable that kind of the prediction is, where you're going to find some. Like if I found some mammal fossil, some large mammal, that would have been suspicious. But anyway, also I want to touch on something else that you said. You're talking about heat of the ocean during the.
Hang on, Donnie. One topic at a time. Don't let me slap and run. One topic at a time. Okay. Jackson, you found a fossil in a rock layer, and they find this same fossil in this same layer at other places. Is that what your point is?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Is the fossil dead?
It is dead.
Okay. Do you know it had any children?
This one may or may not have.
I don't think there's any possible way, Your Honor, to prove any fossil had any children. You certainly couldn't prove it had children that lived. Do you know it had children that were different than itself?
It necessarily evolved. That wasn't the point I was making. It was the point that it was in a specific layer, indicating a specific era of time.
Sure. I believe it's very reasonable that many types of animals would be found in similar layers around the world even. It could also be done by a global flood in the days of Noah. As I said, clams are frequently found in the bottom layers. That's where they live. They're already at the bottom. And I think you could predict, if we dig here, we'll find clams, no problem. But that is not evidence that they're going to change to something else. No animal today.
In the closed position, correct?
Well, they find them in the closed and open position. They've got a bunch of both in our museum. But this fossil you found, could you prove it had any children that were different than itself?
This fossil, no. And the calamite horsetails, well, I assume they're related to the modern horsetails. But they were much larger.
You're saying it's a horsetail?
Horsetail. It's a plant.
Can you spell that? I'm not hearing you spell it.
Horsetail. Is that clear?
That's not spelling it. That's not spelling it. How do you?
I know it's not spelling it. Horsetail.
A horsetail. Okay, got it. Okay. So you're saying this horsetail fossil is larger than the ones that are found today?
Yeah, it was about, they could get up to 40 feet tall.
Right. Well, I would say my Bible says before the flood came, the people lived to be 900 years old, and probably everything was much bigger before the flood. And during the flood, they all got buried. So if you find a fossil horsetail that's bigger than today's horsetail, that's more evidence for the Bible. Thank you, sir.
Well, all right. We'll leave that one there for now. But the other thing is about clams. You were saying you find them in the closed position, fossilized, and they're only in like usually toward the bottom. Yet this is a fossil my great grandmother found actually. This is in southern Arkansas. So looking on the map, I believe it's Cretaceous in age, which would be pretty high up on the column, relatively speaking. So bivalves they're found in every layer, from Cambrian to Tertiary. And you find them today even in the closed position. This one I didn't mess with, and it's just halfway open.
Okay, now hang on. The last fossil your grandmother gave you, it's also dead. You couldn't prove it had any children. You sure couldn't prove it had different children. Okay, but you found a fossil and you said it's from the Cretaceous layer. How do you know that was the Cretaceous layer? How do they tell that?
They date these things for the oil industry, and they map them out for every state.
Yeah, they call it Cretaceous because it contains certain fossils. They date the fossils by which layer they
yeah.
come from, and they date the layers by which fossils they contain. Circular reasoning. I covered that very
Well,
thoroughly.
it's
Video
mostly
number 4.
radiometric dating, but it's
No,
index fossils as well. But my index fossils are kind of my point. You only find certain fossils in certain layers, and like trilobites, you don't find above the Permian. Ammonites, you don't find above the Cretaceous.
Well,
and that's very
all
strange.
this geologic column I'm showing on was made up in 1830, way before there was any radiometric dating. All
Right.
the index fossils were selected.
Right.
The geologic
That's true.
column and the index fossils and the ages were invented way before there. So don't tell me radiometric dating did it. That wasn't until 1950. Willard Libby, University of Chicago, with carbon dating. Then we got potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, lead 208, lead 206. So all the dating methods are in the last 60, 70 years. But your geologic column has been taught as established science for 100 years before that. So how did they tell? How did they tell it was Cretaceous 100 years ago?
Sure. Back then they were using mostly index fossils. In fact, pretty much exclusively index fossils. But and
that would be my point. The
they,
index fossil.
They didn't use They didn't say the Earth was 4.5 billion years old back then. They were saying maybe it's hundreds of thousands, maybe it's millions. They really didn't know.
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with over history. I've got a chart showing how they keep adding time and more time to their pacifier to make them happy, because now they realize, boy, 1 million not going to work. Let's make it 1 billion. And just a few weeks ago, they had a new article that said the universe is twice as old as they thought. It's not 13 billion, it's 26 billion. And in 10 more years, it's going to be 200 billion years old, because they don't have enough time to change the frog to a prince.
Well, that's not why they said the universe was older, rather.
Can you link that again? I would love to read that.
That's one study. I mean, it's not established science yet. The universe is 26 billion years old, but I suspect the universe could get older as we look further back, get bigger and bigger telescopes, and see light further and further back. So that could happen. But I don't think
the universe getting older. It's the measurements getting more and more accurate.
Oh, okay. Donnie, Donnie? You're muted there.
Yes.
I gave tours today. It's 100 degrees down here. I drank 400 gallons of water. I need to go potty. Can you guys talk to him for a minute while I'll be right back?
Absolutely. Kent, feel free to take your time. And maybe this is a good time to bring in C Science. Jackson, what was that? You said something and I didn't quite make it out.
Oh, sorry. You said we'll talk amongst ourselves.
Yes,
I had something I wanted to say, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So we actually have seen fossils of animals that were female that have scratch marks along their hip bones where the uterine cavity would be. That proves that we can show a fossil actually did have children. And I don't know what Kent means when he says prove that they had different children. I don't know what he means by different. I'd like to get some clarification on that. But I think it's actually more evidence for, I guess, our side that the radiometric dates confirmed all of the dates before radiometric dating was even invented. So that's all.
I like to point out when it comes to the fossil record and these historical reconstructions that we see based on the fossil record and descent with modification. I like to point out that today, empirically, when we look at natural selection and mutations, the so-called driving forces or mechanisms for evolutionary change, I would argue that there's evidence that they are inadequate to drive forward evolution. And therefore, without an adequate mechanism, any historical reconstruction that we see based on fossils lacks explanatory power. And so rather than these reconstructions being a conclusion drawn on actual data, I think it's more so a presupposition imposed on the data. And any thoughts, gentlemen? Well,
I don't know. I mean, if you can find a calamite horsetail in Cambrian rock, I'm waiting for that.
Well, I'd wonder, Jackson, and obviously, AJ, you can respond to what I said there too, but the fossil record in general seems to be defined by stasis and also sudden appearance. For example, I saw Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal in the chat, and I appreciate it. He asked the question, and I think it's a good question, why do we find flowering plants basically in the top sediments? I think the first appearance of flowering plants is in the early Cretaceous sediments. You probably could confirm that, Jackson.
Yeah, I
But
believe it is.
okay, but even those flowering plants are characterized by sudden appearance with no precursors into what they evolved from, Jackson. So
Well,
speak to that.
well, the things that do have precursors, I mean, I think I'm not very familiar with plant transitional forms, but there are a lot of things with transitional forms, precursors. But it seems like, frankly, it's never quite good enough. There's never going to be one that's...
We have sudden appearance and explosions of life all throughout the so-called geological column. We've got the Cambrian explosion, we've got a Permian explosion, we have the sudden appearance of various mammals, various dinosaurs. We see this with the Cambrian creatures and phyla, and we also see creatures like the living horseshoe crab that haven't changed in supposedly hundreds of millions of years. We see it with coelacanth. And so again, we see sudden appearance and stasis in the fossil record. And I feel the more parsimonious explanation for that observation is biblical creation. Jackson, speak to that.
Well, I have a very bad short-term memory, but I'll try to add the few points I can remember from that. But as for horseshoe crabs, there used to be many more varieties. They used to look pretty weird back in the day. There's only one that made it, or two species that made it. Today they look pretty much the same though. But coelacanth's a similar story. They look a little bit different throughout time. They look pretty similar to the one today.
Right, there is some variation.
Yeah.
For sure, because even according to the biblical creation model, it's been, thousands of years, been a couple thousand years since, 4,000 years to be exact, since the flood. And so we'd expect some change. But largely, when you look at a coelacanth today and a coelacanth in the past, they're more or less the same with some variation. I do see, real quick, Jackson, we'll let you respond to that, but I do see Kent is back. So Kent, good to have you back. Hope you're feeling refreshed. Jackson, feel free to give a quick response, and then we're going to throw it back to Kent to engage.
Well, you said the sudden appearance of mammals. I would say it wasn't so sudden. Like the precursors to mammals are the Permian pelycosaurs. Then you've got the Carboniferous, kind of some further iterations. Then the Triassic, they really start evolving. By the Jurassic, you got basic mammals.
Okay, we can definitely discuss that a little bit more, Jackson. Kent, we'll throw it back to you, brother. Any thoughts? Anything you'd like to add?
Yes, sir. We don't see any of this happening today. Animals and plants all over the world are having babies. Nobody is seeing any of them change to a different kind, to a different, what anybody would call a different species. Well, maybe species is a bad word to use because we don't know exactly the definition. I'll show you 7 different in a minute. But nobody is seeing evolution happen today. So therefore, we have to imagine that it happened in the past. And the only evidence we have from the past is the fossils. But you don't know those fossils had any babies. You could not prove in any court of law that any fossil had babies that lived. And you certainly could not prove it had babies that lived that were different, since no animal today can make babies that are different. Clams make baby clams every time. So why would I want to believe a clam slowly turned into something else? Why would this chart they show in the textbooks be considered science when we don't see any of this? So it's not happening today. We have to imagine that it happened in the past, but yet you don't have any evidence from the past except dead creatures, fossils of dead creatures, which are better explained by rapid burial, or they would not have fossilized at all. How many animals died in the last 5 years in the world? Trillions. How many fossilized? Probably none. Buffalo were killed by the millions out west in America here. None of them fossilized. Go find me a fossilized buffalo. We
It
do
takes
find
longer than
fossilized
that.
buffalo. The fossilized
Because
buffalo
it
would be
takes
from
longer than
Noah's
5
flood.
years to it takes longer than 5 years for things to fossilize.
Well, then, AJ,
So
it would rot. It wouldn't fossilize. Even bones rot. We got a pile of cow bones we put out here for my tour last year. They're already disintegrating in 1 year. So no, you are mistaken.
Not if they're in a mudslide, or if they're in quicksand, or if they're
Bingo.
covered
You
rapidly.
got it. A rapid burial, just like Noah's flood would do.
Except those things
Noah's
weren't
flood.
floods, were they?
Well, Noah's flood would form trillions of fossils. I think anybody who studies this will tell you there are a lot of fossils in the ground. I mean, like maybe even quadrillions. Well, if you count diatomaceous earth, quadrillions or quintillions of fossils. They do exist, but they're not forming today. Animals are dying by the millions, and they're not fossilizing. It takes a special. Show me some.
No, how do you know it's not happening?
Well, I've not investigated the whole world. Nobody's been able to show it happening.
The process. Why would the processes that formed the fossils from the past stop, and when did they stop?
No, it didn't. It's the same process. They have to be buried rapidly, like you said.
Then what? You just said animals aren't fossilizing anymore. So when did the process that formed the original fossils that we do have? When did that process stop happening?
The process of forming fossils has never changed. But the fact is, we don't see it happening today unless it's, like you said, a mudslide where they're buried rapidly. Whoa, like Noah's flood would do. How many animals that just die and lay on top of the ground, do they fossilize? No. The scavengers carry them all over the woods, and then the bones even rot. Bones are left out for a couple of years will rot. I'll show you my pile of cow bones when you come down here. So the fact is, the fossilization process is fairly well understood. There are several different types, replacement fossils and encapsulation. But when the bones are replaced, when the bone cells are replaced by minerals in the ground, especially when you get soft tissue fossilizing, they find fossilized worms and fish with the meat. Well, you'd almost think it was buried rapidly in mud and preserved from contamination with rapid oxygen and bacteria to eat it. The fossilization process has not changed. But the fact of numbers of trillions of fossils forming has certainly changed. We don't see that. They're not forming by the trillions today. Show me fossils forming.
Still forming today? Do fossils still form today?
I've not seen any. I guess they could if they, like you said, AJ, like you said, if they were buried in mud. I've not seen any.
All these, you said trillions of buffalo died. How many fossilized? Probably none.
Right.
That's what you said. Now you're saying that the fossilization process does continue. So which is it?
Listen to me. The process of how they form has never changed. The fact of billions of them forming has certainly changed, because there are not billions of them forming today, are there?
Well, you said you don't know.
Do you know? Show me where it's happening.
Mauritius.
It's happening within the crust of the earth. Yeah, all over the earth in the crust.
So the fossils are forming today in the crust of the earth. Is that your statement? I can quote you on that?
Yeah, just like they did in the past.
Just like they did in the past. So the fossilization process, the trillions of fossils that are found, huge beds of fossils by the billions found they mine them out in some places. How about the fact that if they're buried deep enough, they turn to oil? Where is that forming today? Is enough animals dying to form oil today?
Probably, yes. But you're right when you say that a huge percentage of animals that died will not fossilize. The fossils that we have are a tiny percentage of all the animals that have ever lived and died on the earth. That's true. But the process that caused those animals, their bones, to turn into fossils is still happening. So I don't know why you say that fossils aren't forming anymore. Like, I'll let somebody else go.
The fossils.
Yeah, I think Sea Science has a question. You there?
Yeah.
Sea Science?
He's on mute. There you go.
Hello? Hello?
Hi.
Sea Science, good to have you on the... Yes, you're coming through. Okay, so
all right.
I'll jump in real quick.
Do I need to give an introduction?
Jackson wrote...
Or what?
Yeah, Sea Science, let me just talk real quick. So Jackson, we'll come back around to you. There's a couple people on the panel that I think just have a question or two rather than ongoing debate. So we'll get those couple questions in, and then we'll move back to specifically those that want to engage Kent in debate. So C-Science, real brief introduction, and then if you had a question, feel free to ask it.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure no introductions needed. You all know me. I like long moonlit walks on the beach, pictures of flowers, puppies, kittens, seascapes, landscapes, mountains. I like paintings of them, you know. But how are all you tonight? Enough about
We're
me.
doing good. It's been an excellent show, as these open mics usually are. So, C-Science, great to have you. If you had a question, feel free to advance it.
I'm waiting for a question.
Sure. Yeah, my question was for you, Donnie.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna give it just now. So basically, my question is does Donnie actually believe in the Australopithecus species of human evolution when he says chimera?
So, good question. I oftentimes quote directly from the paleoanthropological community. One specific famous paleoanthropologist is Lee Berger. And he very curiously put out a video on species. I've actually got it in front of me. And he's an evolutionist, not a creationist by any means. He put out a video titled Species Concepts in Paleoanthropology. And so if people want to check that out, please do. At timestamp roughly 10 minutes and 40 seconds, he points out that Australopithecus afarensis, specifically Lucy, may actually be chimeric. Now, what he means by chimeric is that there are bones associated with Lucy that don't actually belong to Lucy. And so a lot of Lucy is artificial. It comprises bones from different species. And other paleoanthropologists admit that the Australopithecines and the Homo genus, there's overlap. And so there may even be human bones mixed in with the Australopithecines, specifically Lucy. C-Science, does that answer your question? And feel free to respond.
So the biological term, chimera, when you're talking about genetics, means that it's an animal that's been hybridized between two different species, or the same species, but two different animal forms into a new animal form. That is a chimera. This is a real living form. Do you believe that Australopithecus are a real living form?
Well, if you just listen to my answer, I'm pretty sure Sam understood what I said. The answer is Lucy, as per Lee Berger, and other Australopithecines like Australopithecus sediba, as per Ella Bean and Yoel Rack, two more paleoanthropologists, they are artificial. They are the result of the accidental combination of multiple species. Sediba, for example, comprises bones from apes and also from humans. And Lucy, the same thing. I mean, one of Lucy's vertebrae is from a baboon they discovered. So anyways, C-Science, to your point on chimera, it depends on the context. In the context of paleoanthropology, we're dealing with fossils. So when Lee Berger says Lucy may be a chimeric species, he is saying that the Lucy collection comprises bones from different creatures. Does that help answer your question, Mark? Kent, go ahead, brother. Actually, Kent, let me unmute you real quick.
It sure does, Donnie. It sure does. And you know what? And you know what, Donnie? It proves to me that you're using the wrong term. And you use the term that an evolutionist
I'm using the term that the paleoanthropologists use.
And beyond that, the term
C-Science, you're welcome to stick around, but while we have Kent here, we're going to focus the stream.
Science,
C-Science, hold on for a moment.
It means that it's a real living animal. So you're using the wrong term to
back up. Is he still talking? Does he not understand? While we have Kent here, we're going to focus on Kent. But you're welcome to stick around and have this conversation when Kent has to go here.
Okay.
Kent, go ahead,
I think he's took him a long time to miss the obvious. The bones that they used for Lucy, as you said, Donnie, were a mixture of other creatures in there. It's not all the same animal, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
They're dead. You don't know that Lucy had any children at all, let alone different children. And why do we keep looking for bones in the dirt as evidence of something changing when we don't see any animals today changing? Monkeys are still having babies today. So are chimpanzees. So are baboons. So are orangutans. Why don't they do it again today? This isn't science. To find a bone in the dirt that you think looks like it might have some human characteristics, all you know is it died. That's all you could prove in court. You couldn't prove it had any children. So I don't know how you guys can't see that point. To me, that's obvious. What he found was, and you're probably right, Donnie, it was a chimera put together from bones of different animals, but it wouldn't matter. It's still all dead bones. That's not evidence for evolution. I'm still looking for somebody to show me why these charts they show, this one has the cow. I agree there's 400 kinds of cows in the world, but we got a bunch of them here on our property here. We raise cows here, okay? But they got cows and hummingbirds and frogs going to a common ancestor. That's not science. That's imagination. That's a religion. Do you believe a hummingbird and a frog and a cow had a common ancestor? AJ?
Why do you ask questions where you already know the answer?
I'm trying to show how dumb your thinking is on this process. I want the whole audience to see how dumb this religion is you have. That's why I keep asking this question. It's dumb. Yes, you do believe a hummingbird and a frog and a cow have a common answer. I'll answer for you. And you can't see how dumb that is.
Well, I may be dumb, but at least I pay my taxes.
That's desperation striking here, Donnie. Okay.
Guys, Okay, let's go on to, I believe the next person is Tyrannotherium, if I said that right. Good to have. I think this is your first time here for one of our open mics.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, in the private chat, you said you were more of the evolution persuasion.
Yes.
And therefore, if you'd like to give yourself a brief intro, and then feel free to address anything Kent has said, or if there's a specific question or challenge you had, feel free to present it. Go ahead.
All right, then. Hello, guys. I am Tyrannotherium. I study evolution. I also talk about prehistory, like dinosaurs, prehistoric mammals, and other fossilized prehistoric creatures. To my two questions to Kent is that you say that fossilized animals don't have children. Well, there's a fossilized prehistoric horse that was pregnant when she died, and there was a fetus inside of the horse's belly. Of course, there was also a Tyrannosaurus Rex specimen that Dr. Mary Schweitzer found, and she's suggesting that this animal was pregnant when she died. So
we do one topic at a time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have said hundreds of times, you cannot prove it had any children that lived. You certainly can't prove it had children that lived that were different. Was this fossil that was pregnant producing the same kind of animal as the mom or dad mom was?
Yes.
Was the horse going to have a horse? Was the baby going to be a horse?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. But AJ believes that somewhere slowly it's going to change to something else. I'm asking, I'm stating, no fossil is going to provide evidence for any animal changing to a different kind of animal. They find lots of fish that have pregnant fish that are fossilized. That's no question. And they're found the baby fish eggs inside. This horse had a baby horse inside. I'm not saying that fossils don't have babies, or I could think we could prove they at least had a baby. We don't know that the baby lived, which is what I try to be careful to say. You don't know that it had babies that lived. You don't know it had babies that were different. Show me a fossil from all your paleontology study that was producing a baby that was different, because the charts are showing somehow this amoeba turned into a hummingbird and a frog and an octopus. There's no evidence for this. That's what I'm trying to point out. This is a religious belief. There's no evidence for any animal making a baby that's different than itself. It's the same kind. Everybody would call it the same kind. Horses have baby horses. So you're missing the point. I'm not saying, I go back and listen. I've said it hundreds of times. I believe the evidence is clear. There's no evidence of fossils. They couldn't prove any fossil had children that lived. I try to be careful to say that. And you couldn't find
huge populations of fossils, though, like let's say fossilized fish. How would it be possible for that population, for us to find that if they didn't have children?
Well, there you go. You see, you can't find one that was different. And now you want to hide in the fact that there's a whole population having them. Show it to me happening. There's a whole population of people out there, but when the detective has to find the murderer, he has to find the specific one if he wants to convict him. Show me the specific animal that produced a baby that was different than its kind.
What do you mean by different?
Population.
No, what do you mean by different, though?
Would you say a hummingbird and a cow are different?
If we go back millions of years ago, yes. But now they separated millions of years further back. I mean, further than now.
Can you tell the difference between a hummingbird and a cow?
They're both warm-blooded.
So you can't tell the difference?
I mean,
yeah.
Well,
there's a difference.
Yeah, there is a difference because
there is.
A bird is a bird, and a cow is a mammal.
Very good. I understand. Has anybody ever seen hummingbirds produce non-baby hummingbirds? We have them around here at our bird feeders, and they make baby hummingbirds every time. Do you believe the hummingbird and the cow have a common ancestor like this book shows the kids in school?
Those are two different questions. So we don't see hummingbirds give birth to non-baby hummingbirds because evolution doesn't teach that, nor would it allow it. So that's your straw man.
Oh, no, it's exactly correct. I'll show you one more time. Maybe you'll get it. Okay, watch this carefully. Here is a family tree. At the bottom is I'll get a better one here, a single-celled creature like an amoeba or a bacteria. They show this single-celled creature turning into sharks, for instance. Do you believe sharks came from a single-celled creature?
Yes.
Can you show me some evidence where a single-celled creature ever turned into a shark or anything toward a shark?
Not in one generation, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Show me all the evidence you have from all of history and all of science, and I think you'll find all we've ever seen, sharks make baby sharks, amoeba make baby amoeba, octopus make baby octopus. This chart is pure imagination. Here we have a protozoa turning to a biology teacher. Kids are taught this in 3rd grade. This isn't science. This is propaganda. This is a religion, and it is stupid. And I'm running out of time here, Donnie, but get some more in here. Go ahead.
Okay, Tyrannotherium, feel free to stick around as we've got another 10-ish minutes with Kent. Once Kent leaves, we'll go around the room and continue the discussion on evolution. So next up on the panel is Apologetics 101. My brother Brian, good to see you. Hope you've been well. Keep up the good work putting out content, loving the Genesis series. So quick introduction, and then feel free to present your question or whatever was on your mind, basically. Oh,
he must be muted.
You must be muted, but it doesn't say you're muted, so your mic might not be connected. So I'm not hearing any sound from you.
Nice.
Brian, I'll leave you unmuted if you want to figure that out. And AJ, was there something you wanted to say to Kent there?
Well, I would say to Apologetics, it's probably in the StreamYard settings. It might just be that you have to select the right microphone, because I do that sometimes. But yeah, for Kent, I would just say that you're saying provide evidence of evolution, but your definition of evolution is it has to happen in one generation. But you're comparing an animal giving birth in one generation to millions of generations, and it's not the same thing. But you're conflating these two things.
I understand completely, AJ. I understand completely. You've said that many times. My point is, okay, if it doesn't happen in one generation, if we can't observe it, it doesn't fit the definition of science. You believe it happened by faith over millions of years. Okay, you can believe what you want. That's not observable science. And we don't observe it happening even creatures that like bacteria have a generation time of 8 hours. They've done all kinds of studies in the laboratory. You can get 3 generations in one day. And they've watched them for hundreds of years, for 100 years. And they're still making baby bacteria. So how long did it take to turn that bacteria into a whale? And where's the evidence?
So if I can't see a mountain forming during my lifetime, that doesn't mean that mountains don't form and haven't formed in the past.
Hey, can y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Turn the game down.
Thanks for that
Hold
suggestion.
on, brother. Let's let AJ finish his thought real quick.
Okay.
And actually, as you do that, AJ, Brian, if you go back into the StreamYard settings where I assume is where you fixed it, make sure your external mic is on because it sounds really echoey. And I think it might be coming from your laptop. So as you do that, we'll throw it back to AJ.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just because something can't be observed in a human lifetime, that doesn't mean that's not scientific, because we can observe the effects that happen because of that thing that happened before we were around. That's pretty much what geology is. So just saying that, well, we can't observe evolution happening in one generation, so it's not science, that doesn't really work.
Well, let me answer that. Science, the definition of science is things that we observe, study, test, and demonstrate. We observe, the word comes from the Latin word "ser," which means knowledge. What do we know? We know mosquitoes make baby mosquitoes. We know that. And we know mountains are pushing up. We can see them rising up. We don't see mosquitoes turning to anything else, though. And we don't see elephants producing anything other than baby elephants. So if you wish to imagine that the elephant came from a protozoa, that's now part of your religious belief. Even if it's true, it wouldn't be part of science yet. We don't observe it. You got to get a definition of science. Science, what we can observe, study, test. We don't observe evolution. The process by which different kinds, oh, look at that, AJ. They use the word kinds. Oh, no. Okay. Different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the earth. Well, you can think it all you want, but science is what we can observe, study, test, and demonstrate. Google the definition of science: knowledge gained from observation and experiments. Do an experiment and turn an amoeba into something other than an amoeba. You get a new generation every 8 hours. Okay? Do an experiment. They've been trying for, 50 years in the laboratory. They nuke them and microwave them and x-ray them, do all kinds of mean things to those bacteria, and they always make baby bacteria. So you want to believe that's enough evidence that they turned into whales and humans. I'm just pointing out, Your Honor, this is religious belief, should not be taught in schools. It's not science at all. Not observable, not what we can observe. Test an experiment, test it. Way to solve the problem. Okay, cows produce cows. Must be genetic answer in here. Keep breeding them. Babies will be cows. They'll always be cows. Seems to always work. It always works that cows make cows. Corn makes corn. Potatoes make potatoes. Always works. But you wish to believe that potatoes and humans have a common ancestor. It's not science. I wish I could get you to see it.
Kent,
Can y'all hear me now?
Kent, before you go, if we could, let's do a speed round. We got Brian, Godzilla Freak, and Ken. And then Kent will make sure that you're out of here at the 2-hour mark. So Brian, yes, you look like you're coming in a little bit better. So
no echo.
No, you sound good. So it sounds like your mic has evolved. There's evidence, Kent. So Brian, go ahead.
Wow. All right. I think that was kind of it's not what I was going to talk about, but it's kind of funny what AG said about the fossil, or the fossils being billions of fossils forming in the crust of the earth, but we just can't see it. So I thought that was funny. Anyway, what I was wanting to talk about is the radiometric dating. You said that radiometric dating earlier. You said radiometric dating supported evolution, and was you including C14 in that? Is AJ here? He's on mute.
Sorry, say that one more time.
I said when you said earlier that radiometric dating supported evolution, was you including C14 in that claim?
Yeah, I would say
C14 only, even if you assume it's reliable, and there's questions about that, but even if you assume it's reliable, it only gives dates of thousands of years. It doesn't even give dates of millions of years. And on top of that, C14's half-life is 5,730 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. And that's true. But like you said, it's not the only method of radiometric dating that we have.
Yeah. I think they're all flawed, but that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that your statement is that all radiometric dating supports evolutionary view. Well, not all of them gives billions of years, for one thing. And on top of that, don't these dates of radiometric dating are often inconsistent with each other, giving different dates, and that sort of thing. And so I don't see how they would support evolution, because what happens usually is they don't use the dates, which radiometric dating they want to use that best fits the conclusion of what they think how old the world is and how old the rock is, and so they pick and choose that date, and that's circular reasoning. So I just don't see how I mean, without assuming your conclusion and picking the radiometric dating that best gives you the dates that you think things are, how that would support evolution in the first place.
No offense. I thought we were going to focus on Kent while we had him.
Brian, if you had a quick question for Kent, we only got Kent for another 2 or 3 minutes. I want to make sure we give Godzilla Freak and also Ken the chance to get their questions in if they had one. So, Brian, I appreciate your points with AJ. Once Kent leaves, feel free to stick around and engage those some more. Did you have anything specific for Kent, Brian?
Well, what would he say to the billions of fossils forming in the Earth question?
Well, he made that claim. Where do we see this? We know there are billions of fossils in the Earth. Do we see them forming? No, we don't see them forming in numbers today. We know we can dig them up. I got thousands of fossils in our museum here. Come on down and see it. Fossils have to have special conditions, rapid burial, exclusion of oxygen like mud would do, and slow replacing of the cells with the minerals in the ground. It's called a replacement fossil. The existence of fossils is not in question. The question is, are they happening today? Maybe remote places, minute numbers, but you still don't know they had different children. No animal alive can produce babies that are other than its kind. Why do we think a fossil from the dirt can do it? This isn't science. It's a religious belief. And as far as dating, I got a ton of stuff on my video number 7 in here about carbon dating, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium. They're all based on such obvious assumptions a 4th grader can figure it out. You don't know that the decay rate has remained same. You don't know the initial content. You don't know that it hasn't been contaminated. And I show examples where it happens all the time. They get it wrong. If you walked into a room, you found a candle burning on the table, and I said, when was it lit? Well, we can do some empirical science. Let's measure how tall it is. Okay, it's 7 inches tall. We all agree, get them exactly 7 inches. We can watch how fast it burns, burning 1 inch an hour. Okay, we all agree. When was it lit? I don't know. I'd have to make some assumptions. How tall was it when it started? Has it always burned at the same rate? You can't prove either of those. All the radiometric dating with it, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, all of them fall into the same category. You have to assume you know the initial content. You assume there's been no contamination. You assume that you know the rate of decay has never been changed. You can't know any of those things, which is why they get horribly bad dates and they throw them out. How do you know it was a bad date? Well, it didn't match the geologic column. Bad dates. From Google, living mollusk shells dated 2,300 years old. That was back in 63. Did it get better? Let's see. If a carbon date supports our theories, we put it in the main text. If it's out of date, we just drop it. How do you know it's out of date? Freshly killed seal, carbon dated 1,300 years old. Let's see. So maybe they're getting better. But I go through video number 7.
Why would you carbon date something that you just killed? That makes no
Why would it
sense.
not, hey, AJ, why would it not work on something you just killed?
Because you're misusing the method.
Well, how do you know it works on something that died in the past?
Because different labs get the same dates.
AJ, if you know it may not work on something you just killed, how do you know it works on something you don't know when it died?
Because different labs get the same dates when they carbon date samples.
Okay,
sorry,
take a living snail.
Yeah,
get a living snail, break up the shell of a living snail and take it to 10 different laboratories, but don't tell them where it came from or what it is. Just have 10 different laboratories date it. Would they get 10 different ages, you think, from a living snail shell?
You never carbon date living things.
Donnie,
So
the Bible says, "Go from the presence of a foolish man when thou perceivest not in him the words of knowledge." My time's up. I need to go. I think we've demonstrated clearly he has a religion, not a scientific belief.
He's running.
No, he's not running. He made it very clear what time he's going to leave.
2 hours. AJ, I have to work for a living. Okay. We'll see you tomorrow.
Nobody in this panel works. Is that what you're saying? None of us have
jobs? I mean,
jobs?
I also work for a living, so would you mind entertaining me real fast?
Ken,
yes, sir.
I think Ken Rock just wanted to say hi. He said he